But at any rate, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here this evening, and we're expecting it to be a really terrific night. My job is to give you a little bit of background on the World Affairs Council for those of you who don't know about us or are not members. We're a not-for-profit organization. We are nonpartisan. Our mission in this, which is our 70th anniversary year, is to put on programming that provides information about things that are important to the United States that happen outside of the United States. So foreign policy is definitely relevant for our mission, and it's a great pleasure to have our guest here this evening. I'm waiting for Tim to come back. Before we get to this evening's main event, we have a presentation that we're going to have for some folks who have kindly provided us with a significant contribution that supports our operation. Tim, you want to come and join me?
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us here tonight, and thank you to Joel and Robert for our partnership with the local charitable gaming location. It's been a very wonderful and prosperous relationship for since 2008. We've been a part of it, but we've been with the Manchester Gaming Room since about 2016, I think. So we really appreciate your support. We really appreciate the partnership, and happy to have you guys come up and say a few words if you like.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Ballesteros. I'm the Regional Director of Marketing and Community Outreach. And I just want to say to Tim and the board and all of you, thank you so much for being amazing partners. If you're not familiar with the charitable gaming in the state, which I'm sure you guys are probably more familiar with it than I am because I'm new here, but it's an awesome thing. I got to kind of combine what I love to do, which is raising money for nonprofits and the casino industry, and blend them together. Our company, the New Hampshire Group, this year hit an awesome milestone. We started outside of the state, but are in the state now. But this year we hit $100 million in charitable contributions, and we're super proud of that. On top of that, we have programs within our organization so that all of our employees can donate their time. And so anybody that's out there that has organizations that needs help, you can always come to us. We'll bring a team of people and help you guys do whatever it is that you might need to do. So anyway, just wanted to say, oh, I'm sorry. And then within the state, this last year was our first full year of doing the charitable gaming, and we were able to give away $9 million this year to 300 organizations across the state. So super happy about that and super happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So you want to grab a picture? Yeah. All right. Well, this is the big reveal. It is a great number. We love it. We're very excited.
Yeah. So I'll just say real quick. Sorry. So each organization gets 10 days within each property, and so in the 10 days, this is the total for the 10 days here.
So thank you very much. This is huge for our organization. All right. Well, thank you again to Joel and Robert. We were there a few weeks ago after one of our events to have some food. The food was great and wonderful. They're great partners and really appreciate all of the amazing support. So thank you guys. All right. So for tonight, we are very excited to have our speaker, Dan Negrea, from the Atlantic Council. And let me grab my notes here so that I get everything right, as well as proof that I have a copy of his book and have read it. I finished it up the other day. So We Win, They Lose, Republican Foreign Policy in the New Cold War. You can find it on online. Yeah, if anyone needs water or anything else let us know. We can get. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization here to help people better understand the world. We achieve that through speakers programs like what we're doing here tonight. We have a podcast, The Global and the Granite State, which takes a monthly look at different international issues. We do an international visitor exchange program. But we are a community-supported organization, and so thank you to all of our wonderful members, donors, and sponsors, including CCA Global, McLean Middleton, and Southern New Hampshire University, who provides us with this wonderful space for their partnership as well. All right, so Dan is the Senior Director of the Freedom and Prosperity Center at the Atlantic Council. From 2019 to 2021, he was the deputy or the special representative for commercial and business affairs at the Department of State. 2018 to 2019, he was a member of Secretary Pompeo's planning office. And for the prior 3 decades to that, he was working on raising about $15 billion in financing for various organizations on Wall Street. So he's got a wonderful background. Of note and of interest, he actually defected from communist Romania, yes, where he had been an official in the Ministry of Finance, and he has an MBA from Cornell and a master's from the School of International Economic Relations in Bucharest. So, Dan, I'll turn it over to you for some initial remarks, and then we'll get into a bit of a Q&A.
Well, delighted to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So, first of all, I'm thrilled to be in New Hampshire. I'm a politically obsessed person, and New Hampshire has such political prominence because of the primaries being here early. And I remember a few years ago when W. Bush was running, with my wife Nikki and I live in Connecticut. No presidential candidates come to Connecticut. Nobody comes, and everybody comes here, and it's a relatively small state, and they come often and so on. I remember an interview. This reporter asked this lady, "So what do you think about W. Bush?" He said, "I'm not sure yet. I've only met him 3 times." So I'm very happy to be in such a politically prominent state. So you must be very astute politically because of all these visits. It's also a very beautiful state. My wife Nikki and I went hiking this morning, and it was absolutely thrilling. The other thing I want to tell you before I start telling about the book is the book came out in March, and I've been to many podcasts and many interviews and so on. But it's the first time that my wife Nikki is watching one. So please ask me only easy questions. Things like where were you born? Where did you go to school?
Why don't you live in New Hampshire?
Why don't you? Yeah, taxes are lower than in Connecticut. So let me tell you about the book. Well, first of all, Tim was very kind to introducing me. Very sorry that my brilliant co-author cannot be here. Matt Kronig, with whom I wrote the book, is also a senior director at the Atlantic Council. He runs the Scowcroft Center, which is the sort of the flagship center there. It's called the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. He's a tenured professor at Georgetown and wrote 3 other books and co-authored a few. So he's great. So it's not my book. I co-authored it with a great guy. So what's the origin of the book? We wanted to write an early draft of the national security strategy. So by law, every president, I think Reagan was the first who submitted a national security strategy. By law, every president has to go before Congress. And when he asks for money for his budget, he needs to explain what his view of the world is. And there is a national security strategy, there is a national defense strategy. And we thought we should write an early draft, not in the hurly-burly of the early days of a new administration, but in advance. So that was one reason. The other thing, as I'm sure you all noticed, it's an election. So we wanted to write a book to start a discussion early of what a Republican foreign policy would look like. So let me start with the disclaimer. As Tim said, I work at the Atlantic Council, so does Matt. The Atlantic Council is a non-political, bipartisan, apolitical organization, but we wrote a very political book. So whatever view I present here and whatever views we presented in the book are ours and not necessarily represent the point of view of the Atlantic Council. So the title of the book is We Win, They Lose, Republican Foreign Policy in the New Cold War. So let's take it apart. What I proposed I do in a few minutes is tell you about things that we have in the book, and then Tim will ask me questions and you will ask questions, and we can go more in depth on things that you are interested in. Okay. So let's start with Republican foreign policy. Now, a lot of people believe that the Republican Party is hopelessly divided between the Reagan wing and the Trump wing. And we argue in the book that actually just below the surface is what we call a Trump-Reagan fusion, where the Republican Party is in agreement on much more than what there is disagreement on. The Republican Party can coalesce around three major principles. Number one, peace through strength. Number two, a move from free trade to fair trade. And number three, American exceptionalism. So this is the Republican part. The next question, of course, is, well, why didn't we write the book, American Foreign Policy? Well, we wrote the book about Republican foreign policy because Matt and I don't agree with the Democrat foreign policy. Now, if there are any Democrats here, that's wonderful, and we respect everybody's points of view, but he and I don't agree, and we have a whole chapter in which we say that here is the list of what we view as failures of the Biden foreign policy, and we hope that Trump will get elected and will change that. We also have a discussion of the differences between a progressive view of what foreign policy should be and a conservative view of what foreign policy should be. And we show there that a lot of things that we see in the Biden foreign policy continued from the Obama foreign policy come from this perspective that is the progressive perspective. So just in summary, we argue that conservatives are more in the traditional view of the world inspired by religion, where man is fallen and there is evil in the world, and there is a need to have a strong, powerful reaction to adversaries. The progressive view is more of an Enlightenment view of the world, where they believe that people are basically good and can be improved even more, and that most foreign policy problems are not because our adversaries are evil, but there are misunderstandings. And if we only talk to them, we'll sort things out. And we say in the book that no, there is no misunderstanding between us and the Chinese. We understand each other very well. They want to dominate the world and have a world that we believe American people don't want to live in. So it's not a misunderstanding. So we discuss this in the book also. And then we have in the title this concept of a Cold War. Now, when we finished writing the book, we gave it to the publisher in October, it's not that it was avant-garde and unique and extraordinary, but it was not mainstream that we are in a Cold War. You know the expression overtaken by events? We had the war, the Russian invasion in Ukraine. We had the October 7 massacre in Israel. We've had the Houthi attacks. I think very few people doubt these days that we are in a Cold War. This idea that we're in a Cold War is now almost mainstream. And a lot of people are going even further in arguing that we are in one of the most dangerous times in international relations in decades, if not ever. And among the most remarkable people taking this position is Robert Gates, who served with great distinction as Secretary of Defense under both W. Bush and Obama, who said this is the most dangerous time since the 1930s. We have recently General McMaster, who said we are on the cusp of World War III. So tensions are such these days that saying that we're in a Cold War now is almost tame. But when we wrote it, it wasn't. The idea that we are in a Cold War then, of course, begs the question against whom? And we introduced the concept of a new axis of evil. Now, we call it that. Other people call it other things, so axis of autocracies or other things. But we call it a new axis of evil, and we argue that in the axis of evil are China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And what they have in common, they are all brutal dictatorships. They are revisionist and expansionist. And this view of an axis of evil, please note the evil there, so we are not neutral. I don't know if you noticed by now, we are pretty outspoken. Is in contrast with what we get from the Biden administration that has a view of relations with China that they define in three parts: cooperation, competition, and confrontation. And Matt Kroenig and I argue that they've got it 1/3 right about the confrontation part. So if we are in a Cold War, this begs sobering questions. What is the existential threat to the United States? Is it climate change or is it Russia? If we are in a Cold War, is it reasonable that 8 million people cross the border without verifying the background? We don't know who they are. 23,000 Chinese citizens of military age crossed the US border since October only. I'm looking at the audience, I see with very youthful and all that, unlike me, but except for my hair, of course. But maybe somebody remembers the previous Cold War, the Cold War I, and try to imagine that 23,000 Soviet citizens of military age crossed the border and we don't know who they are and where they went in the United States. These are pretty extraordinary things. One last thing. Though we win, they lose. A colleague of mine at the Atlantic Council says, this is a shocking title. You mean the Democrats lose? I said, no. No, we win, they lose is a Reagan quote. Allen, Richard Allen, who later became his national security advisor, came to him, former actor and governor of a state. So, let me tell you how international affairs are. Where we are in the United States foreign affairs is, with the Soviet Union, it's détente. They are big, they are strong, they have a lot of nuclear weapons. We want to keep it. Plus, they are ascending. We are, we've done well for a while. We go slow, we take it easy. We're just not provoking them. It's détente. And Reagan said, well, and we have this as a quote. This is historically accurate. So Reagan said, well, my view is different. It's simple, and some may say simplistic. How about we win and they lose? And 9 years later, the Soviet Union was no more. So the idea of winning, we had the great privilege to have a foreword by former Secretary Pompeo, and we got an endorsement by Robert O'Brien, the last national security advisor to former President Trump. And O'Brien noted this in the book, in his endorsement on the back of the book. He said, this is the right tone. We need to play for winning. And again, what we get from the Biden administration is quote unquote managing the competition. Try to imagine going on the football field and say, we want to manage the competition with the other team. We need to win. Now, the next question is, what does winning mean? Well, first of all, we don't want a hot war. I have a son in uniform, and I have another son if the U.S. were in conflict would volunteer. So we don't want our sons in war. So avoiding a hot war is objective number one. But at the same time, we want to get Communist China and the other members of the axis of evil to the point where either they cannot or decide that it's not productive for them to spend energy in this direction, in confronting us and challenging us and threatening and harming vital and important national security interests of the United States. And look how many words I used, and Pompeo, because he's much smarter than I am, in his introduction put it in 2 words: incapacitation or capitulation. Either they cannot hurt us or they give up on hurting our interests. So that's the introduction.
Well, thank you, Dan, for that. You have knocked out my first 3 questions, so we're saving a lot of time here, which is great. But I will say I want to point out Frederick Kemp, the president and CEO of the Atlantic Council, has a very nice quote here, which I've used in many of our outreaches for tonight's event. It's pretty long, so I'll narrow it down to really the important part here, where he says, drawing on the experiences of the Reagan and Trump administrations, Negrea and Kronig provide a must-read for anyone wanting a comprehensive understanding of the past, present, and future of GOP policy and how it all hangs together. Pretty lofty goal there. And I think, having read the book, that you guys certainly live up to it. There is a lot in here in a little bit of space, which is great for parents of young children who don't necessarily get to read as much as they would like. But what I want to do to start is maybe just outline some of the things that you guys talk about and get a quick yes or no. You may find that I've lumped these together in ways that perhaps you can answer them all in one way. But I think it's a good way to just get a baseline of understanding for our audience. So we'll start with allies and institutions. Based on what I read in the book, you think they're good to have, but they need to work. They need to do more around burden sharing, and they must adopt, or the U.S. must adapt, leave, or reform these institutions when they're not working. Pretty correct?
Oh, you're my guest. I would never say no. I mean, how? No, absolutely correct. Let me pick one aspect, if I may, because it's a huge.
And we'll dive deeper
Yeah.
in a little bit. Just wanted to get sort of a baseline,
Yeah.
sort of rapid fire. So maybe we'll, if you don't mind, we'll just go through a couple of these more and then go a little deeper.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a section on energy and climate change. You and Matt both agree climate change is real, but the effects on U.S. interests are modest. Adaptability and technology will mitigate most, but if left unchecked for centuries, it could make the Earth uninhabitable. and we should pursue an all of the above energy strategy, including dropping fossil fuel subsidies. Yeah? Okay. Border security and immigration, which you mentioned a little bit about. Finish the wall, completely secure the border, and craft an immigration system that better serves our national interests. Okay. So those are kind of the broad things that I wanted to start with. Any key issues? I know that's a lot to throw at you, but any key issues you want to pull out initially to talk about that you think are particularly illuminative of your book?
Yeah, so let me tell you something. I don't know that it's the most important, but it's something that I'm spending a lot of time on, which is how little NATO allies are contributing to the defense of Europe. And so one of the things that I like to do is write with other people. I'm much smarter when I bounce my ideas off other people and I benefit from their perspective, and they prevent me from doing something really dumb, and so that's all great stuff. So Matt Kroenig and I wrote an article with a gentleman by the name of Todd Walters, who was Supreme Allied Commander NATO in Europe. And what we said there was that we need to get to our European allies to spend 3%. They shouldn't be thinking of 2%. They're not even spending the 2%. So that's something that President Trump has complained about bitterly. And how should I put it? With New York clarity and insistence. And people were scandalized about how at some point he raised the possibility of the United States pulling out of NATO, which will not happen, by the way. I don't believe it will happen, but he raised the possibility. Think about it. Without the United States, Europe at this point could not defend themselves from the Russians. Why is that okay? Why should we send our our sons and daughters to defend Europe, where then they are not sending their sons and daughters to defend their continent? Why should the United States spend 3% of our GDP on defense, when in Europe they are spending, some countries are spending 1%? Until most recently, Germany was at 1%. How does this make sense? And by the way, even the 2% is not enough. So 2% is the number agreed upon at the Wales NATO conference in 2014, after the Russians invaded Ukraine the first time. After Russia invaded Ukraine the second time, they had a meeting in Vilnius where they said, well, maybe 2% is a floor rather than a ceiling. We need to spend more. But you know, Poland is at 4%, and Israel, which is in an existential fight there, is at 4.5%. That's where countries that realize that they are in danger, that's what they are spending. And in Europe, they depend on the United States to defend. I went to a German school back in Romania, so I speak German. I like to listen to podcasts in German to hear what Germans are saying in their own language. To my shock and horror, the other day I was listening to a podcast and they were saying, oh, we need to spend on roads here in Germany, because when American troops go to the front to fight the Russians, they need to have good roads to go.
It's nice of them to think of us, at least.
Where are they? And by the way, we're not talking about recreating the armies of the Third Reich. We're talking about Germany was at 500,000 men under arms at the end of the Cold War, just 30 years ago. Today they're at 200,000. They had 3,000 battle tanks. Now they have 300, and half don't work. How does this make sense? And Trump was very insistent on that, and Jens Stoltenberg, who is the NATO's Secretary General, wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal and said, well, you scared the daylights out of them. I didn't say that, but... And now they contributed 400 billion more. This is an urgent matter. It's also a scandalous matter. J.D. Vance wrote an excellent article, said countries that don't pay for their own defense and depend on the United States to defend them, basically are putting a tax on U.S. Taxpayers, because they're taxing us to defend them, and they're not allies, they are clients. Pretty strong language, but I do agree with him. So just picking one of the things.
Yeah, no, that's great. Obviously, this has been an issue since at least Eisenhower, and most presidents have dealt with it in different ways. But I think one of the issues that sort of the mainstream has taken with Trump's approach is the threats to leave NATO. You said that you don't believe that that is really on the table. So is this just one of Trump's negotiating tactics? Does he truly still believe in NATO, and is just trying to, as you said, scare people? And based on what you guys write in your book, how would you propose the next administration go forward in getting NATO to meet those goals and those aspirations when Russia's invasion has been the thing that has pushed them the farthest, so not even something we did?
So I'm not famous. I wish I were, but I'm not famous. So I like to quote famous people when I get very smart questions like this. So Pompeo was in an interview, and somebody asked him exactly this question. Trump said he'll get out of NATO. NATO was the most successful military alliance in the history of the world. Why would we? Do you think he will do that? That's outrageous. And Pompeo's answer was, I can tell you whatever I tell you, but you won't believe me. Or, I mean, you leave thing. But what I can tell you is, look at what he did in 4 years as president. He did not pull out of NATO. So that's the answer. Does he want to get out of NATO? If he had wanted to get out of NATO, he would have gotten out. Let me quote somebody else who I admire very much. General Keith Kellogg, four-star general. He was National Security Advisor to Vice President Pence and Executive Secretary of the National Security Council and all that. So he runs at America First Policy Institute, the security aspect there. He made a very interesting observation. Everybody talks about Article 5 of the NATO Charter, where everybody is expected to protect everybody else. So the United States has to come to the defense of a country in Europe, even if that country did not pay for their defense. Okay. But there is also in the NATO Charter Article 3 that says NATO member countries have to pay for their own defense. So why is Article 5 sacred, but Article 3 is not sacred? So let them pay.
And as I recently found out, Hawaii is not covered by the NATO agreement. It is the North Atlantic that is covered. So when the Falkland Islands off the coast of Argentina were attacked, NATO did not get, Article 5 did not get invoked for Britain because it was not in the North Atlantic. So something to think about there, especially as we are in this new Cold War with mainly China, Hawaii being the closest U.S. state, and there are closer territories, of course, but those are not covered by the NATO alliance. Is that something that you think the next administration should work to rectify, to expand NATO to cover the Pacific as perhaps it re-evaluates its interest, or should it remain focused on the North Atlantic?
There are discussions to this effect that NATO should, Europe is at a crossroads at this point. Let's take Germany, its largest economy there. It was based on, its economy was built on cheap Russian gas, cheap energy in Germany in general, and exports to China. What they're discovering right now is they cannot get cheap Russian gas because they're in a conflict with Russia, and exporting to China is difficult. and because China is now clearly an adversary, and using the terminology in the European Union, it's a systemic competitor. So as Europe realizes that China is a competitor, number one, and as Europe realizes that there is an axis of evil and that it's not just Russia who is a threat, but also China and also Iran, I think we are going to see more involvement by NATO countries, by European countries in Asia. But we must recognize that their military capabilities are way too weak to make a difference. What they can do is have symbolic presences. So there was a German cruiser that passed through the Taiwan Strait, so there was a Dutch ship and so on. I would be thrilled if they could take care of Europe, actually, but they will participate more symbolically, and economically they're a major power, and China understands that if they create a conflict in Taiwan, and we have a situation akin to the one that followed after Russia invaded Ukraine, and there are economic sanctions, then Europe will join the United States, and the consequence will be, economic consequence will be significant.
Okay. I want to leave a lot of time for audience questions because I know that our audiences always have great questions, and that includes our online audiences. So if you're watching online, I will be pulling out my cell phone, not to check any sports scores, but to check for emails and comments in the chat. So please do send those in. But I want to finish my section up before turning it over to the audience. To talk about the biggest part of the book, which is China, of course. And can you outline for us what do you and Matt propose as the biggest dangers that China poses to U.S. national interests, and what are some of the solutions that the next president should pursue?
So China is a multi-dimensional threat. So you know how they say in the military, when you want to remember when they want to teach them the tools of statecraft, they say DIME: diplomacy, information or ideas, military, and economic. If you look, say, at North Korea, they're non-existent economically, and ideologically nobody dreams of crossing the border and going to North Korea unless they are deranged or something. But China is a multi-dimensional threat. They're a military threat. They are they're not rearming. They are arming at a frightening pace, including in nuclear weapons. They are increasing pressure on Taiwan constantly. So the level of provocations against the democratic Republic of Taiwan is constantly increasing. They caused conflict with India. They had provocations against Japan also, so there is a military threat. Economically, we know that they lie, steal, and cheat, creating problems for American companies and companies from the free world in general who want to do business there. And ideologically, they are a development model for many developing countries who look at how China, and this is a reality, raised 800 million out of abject poverty. Now, they raised it from living $1 a day to living more dollars a day, but they're still not a developed country. They're still caught in the middle income trap. So this is the challenge that China represents. And they are also diplomatically coordinating. They are not in an alliance, but in an entente, in an understanding, in a partnership with Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And they coordinate, they support each other diplomatically at the UN and otherwise. So what should the next president do? Number one, increase the military budget. Deterrence, there is no substitute for deterrence. The United States military power has to be such that no adversary will want to try their luck to provoke a conflict with the United States because they would have to be convinced that there is no chance that they can be winning. So that's the power of deterrence. Like the Romans said, if you want peace, prepare for war. We need to be stronger in that respect. Economically, we need to have a vibrant economy. Key to that is energy. We take great exception in our book to the policies of the Biden administration in terms of energy. There has been an effort to discourage an increase in oil and gas production in the United States. There have been regulations that prevent building LNG terminals that our European allies need. If we want them to not buy from the Russians, we should send them LNG. Well, the Biden administration is discouraging that, building terminals and also permits to export more. So we need to have a stronger energy production. So that's the military, that's the economic. On the diplomatic front, we need to have strong allies and we need to convince them to carry their weight. And on the idea side, we need to be very convincing, going around the world, presenting the American model of economic freedom that's leading to prosperity.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We have a microphone in the back, so if you have a question, please raise your hand and use the mic so people online can hear. Ambassador Sweat. And please introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Hi, my name is Dick Sweat, and it's a pleasure to hear what you have to say, Dan. And I want you to comment on what I thought was probably the most cogent speech that Trump gave in his one term in office, at least from my point of view, when he spoke about the southern border and the immigration. And what he did, it appeared to me, was literally read the law that was in place, is still in place today, which no one ever really refers to, and there's all kinds of discussions around the edges of that. But what Trump did at that time was just restated emphatically the existing law and how he intended to uphold that and to carry that out. In a broader sense, I'd be curious to hear how immigration plays into your foreign policy writings. Thank you.
Thank you for asking this question. I've been in dozens of interviews. I think this is the only time I was asked about it, to my great chagrin, because I think it's an extraordinarily important topic, extraordinarily important in so many respects. We have a whole chapter on immigration in our book. So here is how we look at it. The simple way to look at it is, in a book on foreign policy, it's a national security threat. Just remember that just 9 terrorists killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11. We have millions coming into the United States. We have no idea who they are. And these are, so the numbers, I hear all kinds of numbers, but the best numbers that I can give you are this: 8 million people entering the United States from all over the world without verifying their background. So these are the people who present themselves to the border agents. And the border agents, instead of preventing fentanyl coming, who, by the way, fentanyl killed 100,000 Americans last year. Instead of stopping fentanyl, they are Uber drivers taking these people to other places, and they process them, take care of kids, give them food and all that. Okay. But then there is another number. The 1.6 million known gotaways. So there is a whole terminology, and it's getting more and more bizarre the more you get into it, like a Kafka novel. The known gotaways are the border agent is busy processing somebody and sees 10 people crossing the border, and they don't come to the border agents, and those people just go into the United States. Now, given the fact that what an illegal immigrant who deals with the border agent is getting is food, transportation to the city of their choice, in some places permission to work, and so the border agents are nice. Why are these 1,000,006 people avoiding them? It's reasonable to assume that they have something to hide. Maybe they were caught before, they're criminals, they have, okay, so there is that problem. And then those are the known gotaways, but then there are unknown gotaways, people that we haven't seen, but we can assume got into the country. So this situation that we have at our southern border, where millions are coming into the United States, it's a national security threat. They can be Islamic terrorists, they can be Russians, they can be Chinese. I mean, this has to be dealt with from that point of view. So that's issue number one. But then there is another issue, which is all these people who are coming, they are a burden to the United States. They cost hundreds of billions of dollars to support them. We need to spend more money to increase our military capabilities. If you look at the latest Biden administration National Defense Appropriations Act, there was a 1% increase. 1%. Which means if that's the nominal number, after inflation, it's a cut. We need to have money to spend to increase our military, not to support these people. So what we know what President Trump wants to do because he talked about it in many speeches. So number one, he wants to start, quote, the largest deportation program in the history of our country. So these are people who do not have a right to be here. Let me make a parenthesis so you don't think that I'm cold-hearted or an evil person or whatever. I came to this country as a political refugee. I went to a police station, they took me immigration. I said, I'm from a communist country, I'm asking for political asylum. Okay. The United States should continue to be a haven for people who are persecuted, North Koreans, Russians, even Venezuelans and so on, who fear political persecution. What we know from statistics is that 80% of these people who are coming into this country are really economic migrants, because when our immigration judges get around to process them, 80% are rejected. But in the meantime, they are for 4 years in the United States where they get on welfare and things like that. But our immigration system is overburdened. So there will be a deportation of the people who are coming. How do you deal with the new people coming in? What we had in the Trump administration is something extraordinarily simple, which is, it's called remain in Mexico policy. What does that mean? Somebody presents themselves for the board and said, I'm asking for political asylum. Okay, great. What's your name? That's your name. Great. Okay, here is a phone. We'll call you after we process your application. In the meantime, you wait in Tijuana. Oh, but I prefer, instead of Tijuana, I prefer Tahoe in New Mexico. It's much nicer. I'd much rather come to New Hampshire. It's a beautiful place. They have nice. Well, you are asking to come into the United States because you fear for your life in your country. You don't have to feel fear for your life in Mexico. Yeah, but I like it better in the United States. I understand you like it better. I would like to have more hair, for example. But you can't. You wait there. And incidentally, that's what they're doing in Germany, for example, where they are talking to 3 African countries where they want to send people while their cases are adjudicated. They are doing this thing also in the United Kingdom, where they want to send them to Rwanda to wait. In Italy, they cut a deal with Albania, and they have a law. They said they have to process on Italian territory. And the Albanians gave them a little bit of land. They said it's Italian territory, and they put them in a camp there. Again, I'm not advocating for the United States to become heartless, and when a true refugee comes here that we don't admit them. I'm saying that people who are abusing our system and are coming here as economic refugees and are coming illegally, that should be rejected.
And to follow up on that, as you said, you have a whole chapter on this in your book. Can you talk a little bit about what a immigration reform system would look like? There have been many attempts at doing that, and I believe the last major attempt was 2004 under Bush W. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that would look like and who we should be welcoming into our country?
Tim, I like you more and more. I have to tell you, because you're asking me only easy questions, things I've thought about a long time to make me look good in front of Nikki. So
Well,
this is
we'll
good.
settle up later.
Okay. So look, we are in a situation right now where we are in a competition for the economic future of the world. Whoever wins the artificial intelligence, the AI race, will, you know a lot about this, right? Whoever wins the biotech competition, whoever wins the competition for the most advanced technologies will dominate the economic future of the world. And by the way, all these things have military applications. The United States absolutely, positively has to continue to win in this space. To do this, we need to have a legal immigration system based on merit. Today we have 2/3 of people coming into the United States come on family reunification. That's 2/3, right? In countries like Australia, Canada, UK, 2/3 come on merit. So what does family reunification mean? Somebody gets a green card and then they bring their brother and their uncle and their grandparents and so on. What other countries, like the ones I mentioned, do, they say, okay, first of all, do you speak English? Number two, do you have a skill that is useful to our country? One of the great revolutions in the America First policies of Trump was to say, okay, let's make something clear. The government of the United States is here to make the life of American citizens better. We are here to serve America, not to solve the problems of the whole world. I'm not president of the world, said Trump. I'm president of the United States. I love America. President of France loves France. President of China loves China. So we need to ask people who want to come into the United States, what can you do to contribute to the United States? So that's a merit-based system. And in the book, I propose something which is even a step further, which is not only welcoming these people to come to us, actively recruit them from around the world so they come and they work here in the United States, the best and the brightest. Look what happened after the Second World War. We even took Nazis to work here. Von Braun, who built the Apollo program, led the Apollo program that put a man on the moon, he built the V1 and the V2 missiles that, you know, he wasn't a nice guy, but he was a scientist who worked there, but he served the United States. He did something helpful. We need to find the best and the brightest, but that's what the immigration system should be doing.
Okay. Yeah, Senator Humphrey. Just wait for the microphone for online audiences.
Dan, my name is Gordon, and I'd like to raise a topic which so far you haven't raised. I confess I haven't read the book yet. Is it for sale here?
We don't have it here tonight, but you can find it on our website.
Well,
and you can borrow my copy too, Gordon.
I will, yeah. And that is the information war. You've addressed immigration, you've addressed the Cold War, you've addressed military preparedness in terms of kinetic weapons mostly. But we're badly losing a new and equally important war, and that is the war for human minds. You cited Bob Gates, former Secretary of Defense Bob Gates, former director of the CIA, saying that we're in the most dangerous time in our history, if I heard you right. He also wrote a very good article for the Washington Post last fall entitled "America Must Relearn How to Tell Its Story to the World." That's putting it mildly. We need to put our enemies on the defense, on the hind foot, they've got us on our hind foot, we're losing the information war. Have you addressed that in your book? And if, in any event, kindly address that, if you will.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on your eloquence. You put it superbly. Here's what we're saying in our book. We have a whole chapter on American exceptionalism. We need to unapologetically make the case that America is the greatest country that ever was. We accomplished more than others. We've been more generous than others. We fought, we sent our young people to free other countries. We fought in 2 world wars where America was the decisive force. We have a great story to tell. Our model based on freedom is the most successful model to lead to prosperity. And by the way, whoever tells us about the Chinese doing great, they did great in the years of Deng Xiaoping when they introduced elements of capitalism, and under Xi Jinping who is going back to Maoist system. There is a gentleman who is not there. So, the growth rate went from 10% to 5%, and now it's less than 5%, and they have all kinds of problems. The communist system doesn't work. As I like to say, if the Germans couldn't make it work, nobody can make it work. So it just doesn't work. So I agree with you. We need to make the case. We need to say it, and we need to say it unapologetically. What we talk about in the book is we need to. One of the things that we need to do with China, with Russia, with Iran, with North Korea, is to break through their internet walls. So you all have read about the TikTok controversy here, where young people are addicted to TikTok, and it's a propaganda tool for the Chinese Communist Party. But TikTok is not available in China. In China, they control what people can see. We need to get through and make our case. We need to have the equivalent of Radio Liberty, which was America's freedom voice for in the Soviet Union, Radio Free Europe. I can tell you, I was in communist Romania as a teenager, and I would turn to the BBC in English, to Voice of America, and I will hear freedom rather than propaganda. So I agree with you 100%. As I said, the dime, right? Diplomacy, ideas, ideology. Yes, we need to do dramatically more. Tim will hate me, but let me elaborate. One more important.
In your elaboration, tell us what the next president should do specifically.
Well, as I was saying, we need to have money and emphasis on stronger, I don't know what the modern, updated version of Voice of America and Radio Liberty would be.
They are much weakened from what they were once
Correct.
upon a time.
Correct.
Because Congress abolished the United States Information Agency, thinking the Cold War was over. Ever since then, we have not told our message.
And there are people who say the Cold War never ended, and it was just dormant. But the other thing, breaking through their internet wall and so on. But there is something else. As Tim said, I run the Freedom and Prosperity Center at the Atlantic Council. There is this whole issue of some people call the Global South, and I prefer to call the New Non-Aligned Movement. Developing countries that say, it's not our fight. We don't take sides. They have a case, the other guys have a case, the Americans say one thing, the Russians say it's far away, and so on. And we do business with both, and look at the Chinese authoritarian development model. It did so well. We need to make the case for them that the path to prosperity is by way of economic freedom, political freedom, and legal freedom. That's the path to prosperity. It worked for us, the only path that works. So I agree with you, sir. Excellent point.
Yeah, doctors.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. I share one generation removed a little bit of your background. I'm the daughter of 2 immigrants to this country from Hungary, so Budapest, not Bucharest, and actually my late father was the only Holocaust survivor ever to serve in Congress. And
What
although
was
he
his name? What was his name?
Congressman Tom Lantos.
I was about to say, very famous. He
Thank
served
you.
with great distinction. I admired him very much.
Well,
He served, he was in his 80s when he served, right?
Yeah, he
wonderful
to
man.
his 80s, yes. And you know, he often was actually a voice of realism for many of his Democratic colleagues because he had experienced what it meant to live under both fascism and communism, and he had a very clear-eyed view of the world. But I'd sort of like to pivot off of what Senator Humphrey said in terms of our external message and, you know, how we're failing there, and couldn't agree more with you about the need to tear down the firewall, break through the great firewalls. But I think we have another deficit, and I see it around me amongst the young students that I teach, for example, at Tufts University. We have an enormous patriotism deficit now in this country. And when I hear you say, you know, and when I hear Senator Humphrey say, we need to more persuasively tell our story to the world, I find myself saying we have failed to persuasively tell our story to our own children. And it's incredibly disheartening to me as someone who was raised by passionately patriotic immigrants to this country to see the statistics that say dwindling numbers of Americans believe what you said, that, you know, this country is exceptional, is, you know, has been more of a force for good in the world than any country in human history. So I struggle with how we address that patriotism deficit, because I think if you do not have sort of the courage of your own convictions, if you don't have a belief that who you are and what you are is worthy to sort of send out there into the world, it's going to be very hard to succeed in the mission Senator Humphrey talked about and that you're talking about.
Well, superbly put. I agree 100% with you, and we are discussing this in the book. We make reference to the great Jean Kirkpatrick, Ambassador Kirkpatrick, who talked about the Blame America First crowd. People who, and this is in the section where we talk about the difference between a progressive view of America and of what our foreign policy should be, and the conservative view of what it should be. We refer to a statistic that conservatives are more likely to fly the American flag outside their house, for example, by something like 2/3 to 1/3. Conservatives are more likely to say that America is an exceptional country. I find so yes, I lived under communism. I know how bad it can be. We talk about in the book how progressives dwell on America's shortcomings, but they set America against a standard that it didn't exist in reality. It's an ideal standard, the perfect country that never existed in the history. Yes, slavery was terrible. Yes, persecuting Irish people, right? You know, in New York City, they had a sign there, Nina, right? No Irish need apply. They were persecuted. Women didn't have the vote. Women were persecuted. There were many failings, but we worked on them. We fixed them. We fixed them better than many others, but we are not making this case. And you are right in saying that if we don't make the case internally in the United States, how can we make it externally? And this affects the I in DIME, the ideas battle, but it also has a great effect on the military also. How can we send our young men and women to die for their country if our country, we say, is sexist and racist and xenophobic and did all these horrible things? Why would they do that? And by the way, then reality contradicts this, because millions of people cross deserts and jungles and rivers to come to live here in this sexist, racist, xenophobic country. And they risk their life, and it's absurd. And by the way, that's why I'm a conservative.
Yeah, Eric.
So, the microphone now? So I'm Eric Miller, and I can never state this more eloquently than Senator Humphrey, and I'm sorry I don't know your name, but that was very eloquently stated. But America does have a great story to tell, and we do have to win the information war. Senator Humphrey, you were in office when Reagan said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall, right? You were there. And now you have a president that says, well, if you don't pay up, then I'll tell Putin to do whatever the hell he wants to do. So he also shakes down the president of Ukraine for weapons against the fight against Russia. So how does that promote American exceptionalism, as you stated, and how does that put a good story of America to the world when America is going to back off of defending its allies?
So if you could explain, please, what's the shake-up for weapons?
So I think he's referring to the phone call that.
Oh, holding
Yeah.
holding on to
Yeah,
weapons.
you dig up dirt on my political opponent, and then perhaps I'll give you those javelins that you need to fight the Russians.
Good. Thank you very much for your question. Excellent question. In the article that I referred to, that I had the great honor of co-authoring with General Todd Walters, we use the term scaring the Europeans straight. Trump did say, and I had the chance to hear him say this at a meeting a few weeks ago. He said, I was in a meeting, a NATO meeting, and the president of a European country said, so if I don't pay up, you won't defend me? And Trump said, yeah, I won't defend you. In the book we say, no, it's not a book, it's an article that I wrote with Krohn. If you want to be a member of a gym, if you want to go to work out at the gym, you pay the membership fee, right?
This is not a gym.
And that's what we are saying. So if that insignificant thing, if you don't pay your membership, you don't get the benefits of the membership, how about an alliance that is much more important than of a membership? It is scandalous that Germany was paying 1%, and not only they paying 1% for their own defense, but they were lecturing us. Oh, you don't understand how the world works. We talk to the Russians, we do trade with them. And the more we trade with them, the more they will become like us. They become nicer and nicer and nicer. Just you wait. And also in the defense expenses, we should also count, said the Germans under Angela Merkel. We should also count all the aid that we give to developing countries, because the more aid we give them, the more it contributes to the security of the world, because the world will be nicer if everybody lives better. Well, it didn't work. I mean, the theory is good. So President Trump did say publicly and repeated that a European country that does not pay for its own defense should not expect the United States to defend them. I don't know how it will work in practice. If we have a country here and a country here, and one country pays, the other doesn't pay. How does it work? But it is a message that the Europeans should take to heart. And by the way, they are increasing their defenses. And I think that these sobering statements from President Trump are contributing to the discussion with Ukraine. Happy to have a long discussion. I won't keep everyone. But if you want an equivalent, is President Biden telling Israel, if you don't do what I want you to do, I won't give you weapons. But you want this. Let's not debate that. But we'll have happy to have the discussion.
Yeah, Jack.
By the way, sir, I don't know what question you asked, but I'm so happy that there is somebody else with a tie in this room. I don't feel lonely anymore. Plus, it's red, so I already like you.
Yeah, well,
I've got my tie in my pocket.
Doesn't count. Doesn't count.
thank you very much. I never leave home without one. But I had another question different than the one I was going to ask, but you've kind of addressed it. But as we were driving over here, we were talking about the title of your book, and I said, well, I like the title, but I think it maybe should be The New Warm War with Chance of Lightning Bolts or Thunderbolts. But you've answered that question, and unfortunately, I fear that that's really kind of where we are, a warm war with chance of thunderbolts. But my question now then is really the D, the dime, the D and dime. You know, we obviously we're focused on this kinetic war in the Ukraine and what's happening, you know, after the attack in Israel. But there's a whole lot of other things going on that directly tie right back to this axis of evil that you're talking about. And I think some of that's in the diplomatic front. So like the dominoes that are falling in Africa, for instance. You know, these were countries, if not friends, they were at least friendly. We had troops there. And now we're seeing, you know, Russia really come in with a very aggressive engagement with, you know, the Wagner Group and so forth. And we're seeing this in other parts of the world as well. We're seeing our popularity in polling in Indo-PACOM, for instance, go down. What would you say the next president should do diplomatically to kind of reverse those trends?
Well, I can tell you what the next president will not do. The next president, well, first of all, so let's leave politics aside, okay? So I don't want to upset the gentleman. I will leave politics aside as to who I think will be the next president. But whoever the president is, let me tell you where Republicans and Democrats in the United States agree in terms of policy towards developing countries, because that's what you are talking about. There was a time when the United States was extremely wealthy with tremendous available resources, where grants, money that would go to developing countries with no expectation to be repaid, would increase and increase and increase. Number one. Number two, free trade agreements, where again, developing countries will have preferential access to the US market. They want to sell their goods to the United States. That ended with President Trump, who made clear that we're not going to increase grants to developing countries, and there were no free trade agreements. And you know, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, got out, but by the way, Hillary wouldn't have supported it either. Okay. And then President Biden came into power. He didn't get back into the TPP. There is no support for that. And there have been no free trade agreements under President Biden either, or an increase in grants. So neither Republicans nor Democrats believe that the United States should gain support, affection, popularity in developing countries by giving free stuff. So then what is left? What is left is what I was alluding for before. Telling these countries that the freedom-based development model is the winning model. And to make you, I will praise the Biden administration or something, just to make you happy. I don't want you to feel, that it's all, They came up with something great, which is this IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, where I talked to some people in the area, diplomats from Asian countries, who said, "But you didn't give us anything." And the answer is no, we didn't give you anything, but we told you an extraordinarily important thing, which is this: create in your countries an enabling environment so that the private sector can come there. So in your country, deal with corruption, have a legal system that works, have roads, have infrastructure, and then forget about government loans or grants. What you will get is the much larger resources of the private sector coming to your country, and also resources from your country will contribute. So I think that's what we, but you know what, that's the only thing we can do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alison.
Thank you. Very, very interesting talk. And I want to start with your opening, which was, I was really happy to hear you talk about the dichotomy between a progressive and a conservative foreign policy. Because a progressive foreign policy is different than what I understood was traditional US foreign policy, which is a liberal foreign policy. One that's based on universal ideals, universal applicability of law, free trade, the idea that we have a set of shared principles around freedom, around democracy, right? And then a rational-based approach to statecraft, which assumes all states have their interests, and we have to trust but verify, right? Which is the foundation of deterrence. We have to be strong enough to ensure that all of our adversaries know that the consequences of their taking an action that we don't like, that's contrary to our interests, will be really damaging, right? I mean, that's kind of what I understand as conservative, liberal foreign policy. Liberal in the classical sense, not the domestic political sense. But I'm going through and taking notes, and I'm not hearing you describe what I understand as traditional conservative foreign policy. What I'm hearing you describe sounds more like a isolationist, aggressive foreign policy, where, I mean, I'm sorry, but if we are saying that we're not going to defend a country, deterrence is out the window. So there's no deterrence. And we see the consequences of that. And it starts not with Trump, it starts with Obama, right? Obama drew a red line and then, okay. So when you do that, it's problematic. So we've lost deterrence and we have instability as a result. You also talked about not wanting taxes on the US population. So for example, Poland is the only country that pays their 4%. The other ones put a tax. Yet then you lauded Israel for paying 4.5% without mentioning that we pay, what is it, 38 billion a year? Or 3.8 billion a year, 38 over 10. So every person in this room pays 25 bucks a head. New Hampshire pays 19 million. Isn't that a tax?
I'm sorry,
so
what's this? 3 billion is, no, 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 I want, no, 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 but I want to understand the 3 billion. What's the 3 billion?
What you're saying.
He just wants to know what the
What's the
3.8
3 billion?
billion.
3.8 billion in direct aid. We give.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, in
Thank you.
2020,
Thank you. No,
right?
I had
Yeah.
a clarification.
We give Poland. I think we give Poland 22 million in a year. So there's economies of scale, and then we get to the tariffs, free trade. You're talking about need for fair trade. I come from Maine. Man, those tariffs were a tax and a drag on our local economy. 25% tax on lobster, that's our main industry. We take that pretty seriously. The Trump tariffs, right? So tariffs are a tax on Americans as well. And then we get to immigration, and you're making you're talking about how terrible China is, and I agree. I lived in Egypt when China started moving in. It was terrifying. We should be afraid of how China is conducting its foreign policy, but then there's this assumption that if there are 23,000 Chinese crossing the border, that somehow isn't it logical that it's because there's 15% unemployment in China, youth unemployment in China, and all of the repression that's being wreaked on those people, that maybe that's why they're coming, precisely because we are a beacon of freedom? I mean, help me understand, because I really want to see us get back to a liberal foreign policy. I'm just not sure that that's what you're talking about.
How much time do we have?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. And I love the passion and, okay. So several things there. So let's start first of all with isolationism. There is a lot of talk about the Republican Party becoming isolationist. And the example that is being given is that there was resistance to sending more aid to Ukraine. So let me start by saying that I don't believe that the Republican Party is becoming isolationist. What I believe is that what President Trump introduced was this revolutionary emphasis. It's not a new idea, but it's the emphasis on the interests of the United States first. America first. But this doesn't mean America alone. And it doesn't mean America against other countries. It means that we start with our interests. I'll give you a quote that I absolutely love. I'm in love with it. In 1860, Lord Palmerston speaking to the British Parliament, and he said, England has no eternal friends and no eternal enemies. It has eternal interests, and this it's our government's duty to pursue. And I heard President Trump said several times, I love America. Macron loves France. He takes care of France. I take care of America. The United States will give aid to countries where America has an interest. Other countries will give aid when they have an interest. So we will give aid to Poland, we'll give a lot of aid to Israel, we're giving a lot of aid to Egypt also, by the way. Very quickly on the isolationism on Ukraine. The reason why Republicans in Congress objected to that aid was twofold. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I have nothing better to do. Nikki complains. He says I should be doing other things, but I do nothing else. I think about these things. So I can answer your question. I've anticipated it. Okay. Issue number one was, at about the same time that the Biden administration was asking for money for Ukraine, millions were crossing our border. So Republicans in Congress were saying, guys, I understand that there is an emergency on that border, but there is an emergency on our border. Could we please get your attention on our border? And they failed. The border is still not solved. And the money did go there. That was reason number one. But there was reason number two, which is this. The Biden administration has not explained what the goal of our Ukraine policy is. I'll tell you. Okay? So this is
for Russia to win?
Oh, okay. So, okay. Here is why I'm saying that. Okay. So here's what they said. They said, we will be by Ukraine's side till the end. What is the end? How long? I'm sorry. What is the end? Freedom? For the Ukrainians. Well, here is the situation in Ukraine right now. Ukraine, a country of 40 million, is fighting Russia, a country of 140 million. The war is a stalemate, and in a war of attrition. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I have someone on my side. In a war of attrition, they cannot win.
Forget about them?
I'm sorry?
So just forget about it. Forget about it. They can't win, so forget about it.
No. The United States has an interest in a resolution there. And I tell you what the resolution is that makes sense. And I wrote about it, so it's in writing. I'm not making it up on the fly. The answer is this. We need to stop the killing. We need to stop right now. Because Ukraine cannot regain the territories that Russia has already occupied. They cannot regain Ukraine. They cannot regain Luhansk and Donetsk. They cannot regain. So the solution that President Trump talked about was, well, using a figure of speech, he said, I'll solve it in 24 hours. It won't happen in 24 hours. It will happen quickly. How does that happen? He said, I will talk to Putin. I will talk to Zelensky. I will tell him, you have to cut a deal. And then I will talk to Putin, and I will tell him, if you don't cut a deal, we are going to give the Ukrainians, quote, like I've never given them before, meaning give them more weapons, longer range weapons where they can really hurt the Russians. This arrangement would not work without security guarantees. And I wrote an article with General Keith Kellogg in which we are saying that the United States should be prepared to give security guarantees to Ukraine.
We did, and we never backed them up.
They were not security guarantees. They were not
They gave
secure.
all the nuclear weapons back?
They were not securities. The agreement that you referred to, the Budapest Agreement,
Right.
only says that the United States and the other signatories will not attack Ukraine. We give them no guarantees. So we will give them security guarantees this time. And then you will have a situation like West Germany and East Germany, where for a while, without giving de jure up those territories, but giving them up de facto, we have peace in Ukraine, and Ukraine can develop and become a vibrant democracy, part of Europe, the way West Germany was, or the way South Korea is. So countries that, so I think that's the solution there. But from the Biden administration, the only thing that we've got for Ukraine is we'll send them more money, and basically we're giving the Ukrainians the right to decide for how long they want to fight with American money. And by the way, right now Congress is in no mood to give more money. And this raises again the question, what are the Europeans doing? Because the war is on their continent, it's not in ours.
So I want to go back to the first point about Republican contention, that yes, there's an issue with the border in Ukraine and the invasion, but we have the issue here. There was a bill passed by the Senate that died in the House that was going to address both border security and aid to Ukraine. It was killed. I'm not a political analyst here, but it seems like when Trump said, no, leave it for me to fix, the bill died. What is your reaction to or insights
Yeah,
there?
that's not in the book, but I'm happy to give you a personal point of view. I won't hide behind it. The House passed as soon as the House had a Republican minority of 2.5 people or something like that. Okay, they passed something called H.R. 2. H.R. 2, the House resolution, basically said what I said before, remain in Mexico. People don't come in anymore. Senator Langford, a wonderful man, devout Christian, I talked to him, wonderful man, negotiated with Senator Murphy from Connecticut a deal that allowed something like 5,000 illegal aliens to enter the country. So he was not solving the problem, he was putting a limit on the problem. I don't understand why they would do that. So, yes, there was a Republican senator who proposed something working with a Democrat senator, and he said, this is what we came up with. The House had passed a different piece of legislation to solve the border. In the Senate, they found it. So his colleagues said no, and recently, no.
The Senate, initially, about 70 senators were going to vote for Langford's bill until Trump said no. I don't know the exact number, but there were a lot of Republicans who were about to vote for that.
By the way, we don't know that Trump said no. We assume that. Anyway, here is what we know for sure. Schumer brought it back yesterday, the day before, and this time even Langford voted against it.
That was just to put them on the record.
But look, it was not a solution. It was a compromise. Sometimes in Congress and in Washington, they say, well, let's find the middle solution. But sometimes the middle solution is not a solution. So it was a bad idea.
Okay. So we are at time here. I know there are a ton of questions, and I've got my whole book here of questions. But thank you to Dan for joining us here today. Thank you all for your wonderful questions. It was a very lively discussion. I am so proud and honored that you took the time to come out on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend on a beautiful day. We really appreciate it. I think this was a fascinating conversation as I expected. So thank you for bringing your perspectives and your questions and your interest. We are here because of you. We are here to support you and to provide what we believe to be very important work, and we are so glad that you are here to help us in our efforts to better understand the world, and we appreciate people like Dan for taking the time to come and talk with us and have these lively debates. So thank you very much. Have a great evening. If you are a patron or a sponsor, we do have a dinner with Dan. We can continue conversations afterwards back in the same room that we had the reception in. So thank you very much. I'm sure Dan's happy to answer a few more questions as well if you like. But have a great evening, and we look forward to next time.